That night I drove my daughter to the airport for what I thought would be just another business trip. Everything seemed normal until the moment my grandson, only 7 years old, grabbed my hand tightly. His eyes filled with panic made me freeze. With his voice trembling, he whispered to me, "Grandma, don't go back to the house. This morning I heard Mom planning something against us. Please believe me." In that instant, something inside me shattered. Without asking questions, I started the car and fled with him into the darkness of the night. But before we continue, tell me where you're listening from. Don't forget to add your country's flag and the city you're in. I read every comment, and it truly warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. My name is Margaret. I'm 70 years old, and until that night, I believed I knew my daughter Rachel like the back of my hand. I've been living with her and my grandson Evan since my son-in-law's death 3 years ago. A car accident that left deep scars on all of us, especially on little Evan, who since then has become an extremely observant and quiet child. That Thursday, we took Rachel to Austin Bergstrom International Airport for a business trip to Dallas. She's a marketing executive at a major tech company and travels frequently. We arrived early. The terminal was relatively empty, and the icy air conditioning made me pull my thin coat closer to my body. "It's just 3 days, Mother." Rachel smiled while adjusting her carry-on bag. "Take good care of Evan and don't forget his medications." Evan, beside me, firmly held his superhero-patched backpack, watching his mother with attentive eyes. He's never been one for many words, but that night he was even quieter than usual. "Everything will be fine, sweetheart." "We always manage, don't we, Evan?" I tried to include my grandson in the conversation, but he only nodded silently. Rachel crouched in front of her son and smoothed the hair that fell over his eyes. "Behave well with Grandma." "Come back soon, Mom." She kissed his forehead and Evan remained motionless like a little statue. I watched my daughter with my heart swelling. Despite the difficulties, she had transformed into a strong and independent woman. After losing her husband, she threw herself into work with even more determination, perhaps as a way to escape the pain. I admired her resilience, even when I noticed a certain emotional distance growing between us. "I have to go," she said, looking at her watch. "Boarding starts in half an hour." We hugged briefly. A mechanical embrace without much warmth, something that had become common between us lately. She kissed my cheek, took her suitcase, and walked toward the gate. We watched her silhouette move away until it disappeared into the crowd. "Let's go, Evan. It's getting late," I said, taking my grandson's hand. We walked through the terminal corridor toward the parking garage. Evan didn't say a single word during the entire journey. His silence didn't worry me. It was his way of being. Since his father's accident, he communicated more with looks and gestures than with words. The parking garage was poorly lit. Only a few yellowish lamps cast shapeless shadows on the concrete floor. Few cars were parked at that hour. I pressed the alarm button, and the lights of our old Ford flickered. I started walking toward the car, gently pulling Evan by the hand. That's when I felt it, a strong pull, almost violent. Evan had stopped suddenly and was gripping my wrist so tightly that his small nails left marks on my wrinkled skin. I turned around, confused. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, crouching down to his height. Evan's face was pale under the yellowish light of the post. His eyes, always attentive, were now wide with pure terror. I had never seen such an expression on his little face. A chill ran down my spine. "Grandma!" He whispered so low that I had to lean in to hear. "Don't go back to the house." "Please believe me." I was confused, thinking maybe he was afraid of the empty house without his mother. "Don't worry, my love. We'll be fine, just the two of us for a few days." He shook his head vigorously, gripping my wrist even tighter. "No, Grandma, don't go back to the house," he repeated, now with his voice breaking. "This morning I heard Mom on the phone in the office. She was talking about us." My heart raced. "What did you hear, Evan?" He swallowed hard, his lips trembling slightly. He leaned even closer to my ear. "Mom said that after we fell asleep, everything was arranged. She said, make sure there are no failures. The gas has to look like an accidental leak. My blood froze in my veins. I remained paralyzed, staring at those innocent eyes that now carried the weight of a terrible secret. Please, Grandma. His voice was a trembling thread. This time, believe me, that last phrase hit me like a slap. I remembered other moments when Evan tried to alert me. When he said he had seen his mother hiding documents in the office, when he mentioned she had spent all night tampering with the kitchen pipes. I always believed they were stories from a child trying to get attention. My hands began to tremble. I didn't want to believe it. It was impossible that Rachel, my own daughter, could be planning to kill us. But the terror in Evan's eyes was too real. "Okay, sweetheart," I whispered, caressing his pale little face. "I believe you. We're not going home tonight." The relief in his gaze was immediate and so profound that it dispelled any doubt I might have had. He knew. Somehow this 7-year-old boy had discovered a terrible plan. I stood up with trembling legs. My mind was working frantically. If what Evan was saying was true, we couldn't simply go to a hotel or a friend's house. Rachel could track the credit card, could call our acquaintances. I got into the car with Evan, helped him put on his seatbelt, and sat behind the wheel. My hands were shaking so much I could barely get the key into the ignition. "Where are we going, Grandma?" asked Evan, his small voice breaking the tense silence. I had no idea. I looked in the rearview mirror at that worried little face and tried to sound confident. "We're going to a safe place, sweetheart. I just need to think a little." I started the engine and slowly left the parking garage. We needed time, we needed a plan, and above all, we needed to discover why my own daughter wanted to see us dead. I drove for almost an hour without a certain destination, just getting away from our house. Evan fell asleep in the back seat, overcome by emotional exhaustion. Occasionally, I watched him through the rearview mirror, his serene little face in contrast to the terror he had shown in the parking garage. How could such a small child carry such a heavy secret? While driving through the increasingly deserted streets of the city, my mind worked frantically trying to connect the dots. Rachel had changed in recent months. That was undeniable. More distant, more impatient, always locked in the office making low-voiced calls. I attributed everything to grief, work stress, the pressures of being a single mother. But now, remembering every detail, every strange look, every interrupted conversation when I entered the room, a sinister pattern was beginning to form. I stopped the car at a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of the city. We needed a plan, and I needed to think clearly. I bought watery coffee at the convenience store and returned to the car, watching Evan, who was still sleeping. That's when my cell phone vibrated in my coat pocket. Rachel's name lit up the screen. My heart raced. Her flight should have taken off long ago. Why was she calling? With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello, Mom?" Rachel's voice sounded strangely calm. "Where are you? You should have gotten home an hour ago." I felt a chill run down my spine. How did she know we weren't at home? "Oh, we decided to stop for dinner," I lied, trying to keep my voice steady. Evan was hungry, a silence on the other end. "Then I see. And where are you having dinner?" "At that restaurant near the shopping plaza," I responded vaguely. "Shouldn't you be on the plane?" "There was a problem with the flight," she said quickly. "It was rescheduled for early tomorrow." "I'm heading back home now." I froze. That didn't make sense. Rachel always meticulously checked flight schedules. She would never allow such an unforeseen event to happen. "Oh, what a shame," I replied, trying to sound natural. "So we'll see you at home later?" "Yes, of course," she said, her voice suddenly sweet. "Don't worry about rushing back. Enjoy your dinner. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I hung up and stared at the phone. It was a trap. She was checking if we had discovered something. Maybe she had cameras in the house. Maybe she had realized that Evan had heard her that morning. Evan stirred in the back seat, slowly opening his eyes. "Was that Mom?" he asked with a perceptiveness that scared me. I nodded, unable to hide the truth from those perceptive eyes. "She said the flight was canceled." "She's coming back home." Evan's eyes widened with terror. "She knows, Grandma. She knows we found out." I took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in my hands. Evan, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard this morning. Everything, every detail. He sat up straight, adjusting his wrinkled shirt. He seemed much older than his 7 years when he began to speak. Mom woke up very early. I heard her in the hallway and thought she was preparing breakfast, but she went to the office and closed the door. He hesitated, looking down. I know I shouldn't have, but I went over there and stayed listening behind the door. It's okay, sweetheart, continue. She was talking very quietly, but I managed to hear. She said, yes, they'll be alone. 3 days is enough time for it to look like an accident. The gas leaked during the night while they sleep. No one will suspect. Evan stopped, taking a deep breath, then said something about papers and insurance money. She said, when they're out of the way, I can finally access everything. A chill ran through my body. Insurance, papers. Suddenly, everything began to make sense. 6 months ago, my late husband Robert had left documents for a substantial life insurance policy. Rachel knew I was the primary beneficiary with specific clauses that allocated a considerable portion to Evan, which he could only access when he turned 21. Rachel was the fund administrator, but she couldn't touch the money, not while I was alive. There was also the house that belonged to Robert and me, and after his death passed entirely to me. Rachel lived with us, but the property was mine, a property that was becoming more valuable with the neighborhood's growth. Evan, I asked with a trembling voice, had you heard your mother talking about money or Grandpa's insurance before? He nodded slowly. Many times. She always gets very angry when she talks about it. Once she said on the phone that she was stuck because of us. Each word was like a knife in my heart. My own daughter planning to kill us for money. It was so absurd, so monstrous, that my mind resisted accepting it. But the evidence was all there. The change in her behavior, the sudden interest in financial matters, the constant questions about my will, the business trips that seemed to appear out of nowhere, and now this false canceled trip. She wanted to catch us off guard. She wanted to guarantee we would be home sleeping when the accident happened. What are we going to do, Grandma? Asked Evan, his small voice bringing me back to reality. I looked at this extraordinary creature who had perceived the danger before I did, who had saved our lives with his observation and courage. First, we're going to get even further away, I replied, starting the car engine again. And then we're going to get evidence. Evidence? Asked Evan, confused. Yes, sweetheart. Evidence that shows your mother is planning something terrible, something we can take to the police. Evan nodded gravely. This wasn't a conversation a grandmother should have with her grandson. It wasn't a burden a child should carry. But we were in this together. It was just the two of us against someone I never imagined as an enemy. While driving through the night, an idea began to form in my mind. A risky plan, but one that could give us the evidence we needed. Evan, I said, looking at him through the rearview mirror, do you remember Ray Benson, the security guard from our old apartment building? He nodded. Ray was an old friend, a discreet and reliable man who had worked for decades in the building where we lived before moving to our current house. I think we need to pay him a visit, I said, taking the direction toward the old neighborhood. It was a risky bet. But at that moment, we didn't have many options. We needed a safe place to spend the night, and, more importantly, we needed help to unmask Rachel before she could try again. The car's clock showed 11:00 p.m. when we finally arrived at the old building. My heart was beating hard as I parked on the parallel street, away from the building's cameras. If Rachel was really looking for us, we couldn't leave traces. Stay here just a minute, Evan, I said, turning off the engine. Grandma's going to check if Ray is on the night shift. I got out of the car and walked quickly to the security booth, staying in the shadows. The booth was lit, and to my relief, there was Ray, his wrinkled face bent over a crossword puzzle magazine. I knocked lightly on the glass, and he looked up, confused at first, then surprised to recognize me. Mrs. Walker, he said, standing up and opening the booth door. What are you doing here at this hour? Forgive me for showing up like this, I spoke in a low voice, looking nervously around. But I have a serious problem. I need your help. The small employee apartment at the back of the building was simple but cozy. Ray had lived there since his wife passed away 10 years ago. It was a discreet space with a separate entrance, invisible to anyone who didn't know the building well. Perfect for what we needed. A temporary hideout. Evan was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking hot chocolate that Ray had prepared. The old security guard watched us with concern, still processing the incredible story I had just told him. "Mrs. Walker," he finally spoke, his grave voice breaking the silence. "Are you sure about this? It's a very serious accusation against your own daughter." I sighed heavily. "I know, Ray, it seems crazy. I myself don't want to believe it." I looked at Evan, who kept his eyes fixed on the cup. But I can't ignore what Evan heard. And there are other signs that only now I'm managing to connect. Ray nodded slowly, rubbing his wrinkled chin. He had known our family for decades. He had watched Rachel grow up. He had cried at my husband's funeral. "What do you plan to do, Mrs. Walker?" he asked. "We need evidence," I replied, my mind still working on the plan that had begun to form in the car. "If we go to the police now with just the testimony of a 7-year-old boy and my suspicions, they won't take us seriously. Rachel is respected. She has a solid career. They'd say it's just a misunderstanding or worse, that I'm becoming senile." Ray frowned but didn't disagree. He knew I was right. "And where do I come into this story?" he asked. "I need to go back to the house," I said, feeling Evan tense beside me. "Not to stay, but to look for evidence. I need to know exactly what Rachel was planning, and I need Evan to stay here safe while I do that." "No, Grandma!" Evan exclaimed, dropping his cup on the table with a bang. "It's dangerous. Mom might come back." I took his cold little hands in mine. "I know, sweetheart, but I'm going to be careful. I'm just going to take a quick look at her office to see if I can find any clues." "In and out before she realizes?" Evan shook his head, tears shining in his eyes. "I don't want you to go." "I don't want to be alone." "You won't be alone," I assured him. "Ray is going to stay with you, and I promise I'll be back soon." "You shouldn't go alone," Ray intervened, concern evident on his face. "If what you're saying is true, it's very risky." "I have no choice," I replied. "If Rachel discovers we know something, she might destroy any evidence, or worse, she might try something more direct." I shuddered thinking about the possibilities. I need to act now, while she still believes we don't suspect anything. Ray sighed, running his hand through his gray hair. "At least let me go with you to there. I'll wait in the car, on the corner. If you don't come out in 20 minutes, I'm calling the police." I nodded. It was better than going completely alone. "I want to go too," Evan insisted. "No, sweetheart," I said firmly. "It's too dangerous. I need you to stay here safe. I promise I'll come back." After more insistence, Evan finally gave in, but not without first hugging me with enough force to take my breath away. "Promise you'll be careful, Grandma," he whispered in my ear. "Promise it." "I promise," I replied, kissing his forehead. Ray lent us an old cell phone, one of those prepaid ones without registration, so we could communicate without using my phone, which Rachel could track. We arranged codes. 1 ring and hang up meant I was okay. 2 rings meant trouble. After making sure Evan was comfortable on the small sofa bed in the apartment, with strict instructions to lock the door and not open it for anyone but us, Ray and I left. My heart heavy with what I was about to do. The dashboard clock showed 1:20 a.m. when we stopped 1 block away from my house. The streets were completely deserted, only a few streetlights casting long shadows on the asphalt. "I have a bad feeling about this, Mrs. Walker," Ray murmured, turning off the engine. "Are you sure you want to go?" I swallowed, watching the dark silhouette of my house at the end of the street. All the windows were dark. There was no sign of Rachel's car in the driveway. "I have no choice," I repeated, more to convince myself than him. 20 minutes, as we agreed. "If I don't come back or call the police." Ray nodded gravely. "God protect you." I got out of the car and walked quickly down the sidewalk, staying in the shadows. My heart was beating so loud I was sure anyone within yards could hear it. The house was silent when I used my key to enter through the back door. I closed it softly behind me and stood in the dark kitchen, listening carefully. Nothing but the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick-tock of the living room clock. I took out the small flashlight I had brought and illuminated the path to the hallway. I needed to get to Rachel's office on the second floor without making noise. Every board that creaked under my feet seemed like thunder in the silence of the house. Reaching the foot of the stairs, I froze. A strange smell floated in the air, sweet and chemical at the same time. I sniffed again, trying to identify it. It was gas. Not exactly gas, something different, something that shouldn't be there. Climbing the stairs seemed like an eternity, each step carefully calculated to avoid the ones that usually creaked. In the second-floor hallway, I stopped in front of Rachel's office door. It was locked, as I expected. I took out the bobby pin I had prepared from my pocket. Years ago, when Rachel was a teenager and would lock her bedroom door during her tantrums, I had learned to open simple locks like this one. I never thought I would use that skill in a situation like this. After a few tense minutes, I heard the satisfying click of the lock giving way. I pushed the door slowly, praying that the hinges wouldn't squeak. Rachel's office was impeccably organized as always. Bookshelves with business and marketing books, a dark wood desk with a closed laptop, a leather swivel chair, nothing out of place. I closed the door behind me and began my search. The laptop was password protected, so I focused on physical documents. I opened drawers carefully, examined folders, searched every corner for anything suspicious. It was in the third desk drawer that I found something, a red folder different from the others, hidden under a pile of company documents. Inside were bank statements I had never seen before, accounts in names I didn't recognize, transfers of large sums to someone named M. Stevens, and more alarmingly, a copy of my life insurance policy with margin notes about values and payment clauses. My heart raced. It was real. Everything Evan had heard was real. My own daughter was planning. A noise downstairs interrupted my thoughts. The unmistakable sound of the front door opening. I froze, blood freezing in my veins. Rachel had returned. I quickly took out my cell phone and dialed Ray's number. 2 rings. Then I hung up. The danger signal. Immediately I photographed the most compromising documents with the phone's camera. There wasn't time to examine everything, but I needed evidence. I put the folder back exactly as I found it and hid behind the office door, turning off the flashlight. I heard footsteps on the stairs now, slow, deliberate steps. It didn't sound like Rachel's hurried, firm walk. It was something more cautious. Adrenaline coursed through my veins. I was trapped. If I left the office, I would be seen. If I stayed, I would be found when Rachel came to work in the morning. Or worse, if she decided to enter the office now. The footsteps stopped in the hallway. I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. A shadow moved under the door crack, blocking the faint hallway light. Someone was out there, standing, as if listening. I held my breath, feeling cold sweat run down my back. The door handle began to turn slowly. The office door opened a few inches with an almost imperceptible groan. I remained motionless, pressed against the wall behind the door, barely breathing. Darkness was my only ally, now a silhouette projected on the office floor. It wasn't Rachel. The height was different, taller and broader. A man. The shadow stood for a few moments, as if whoever it was listening carefully. Then Rachel's voice came from downstairs, muffled by distance. "Mark, is everything clear up there?" My heart stopped for a second. Mark, the same name that appeared on the bank statements. M. Stevens. "Just checking," a deep male voice responded, just steps away from me. "The house is empty. No sign of them." "I told you something was wrong." Rachel's voice sounded irritated now, closer. "They should be here." The plan was for tomorrow night after I had returned from the trip. Now the timeline is all messed up. Rachel's footsteps were coming up the stairs. I was trapped between 2 people who apparently planned my death. My only exit would be through the office window that faced a narrow ledge above the back garden. A dangerous fall for anyone, deadly for a 70-year-old woman. "I said it was risky involving the kid," the male voice continued, now moving away from the door toward the hallway. "Kids are unpredictable. He could have heard something." Impossible, Rachel replied, now in the hallway. Evan never wakes up before 7, and I always talk in the office with the door closed. Besides, even if he had heard, who would believe a 7-year-old boy? A dull noise came from downstairs, followed by a muffled curse. What was that? Rachel asked, alarmed. I don't know, Mark replied. I'll go check. You keep preparing her room. The man's footsteps moved away quickly, going downstairs. Rachel stayed in the hallway for a few more seconds. Then I heard her footsteps heading to my room at the end of the hall. My mind worked frantically. Her room, preparing my room. What were they doing? And what had that noise downstairs been? Ray must have entered the house after receiving my danger signal. My old friend, trying to help me, was now also in danger. I stepped out from behind the door, moving slowly to make no noise. Through the door crack, I could see the hallway was empty. Now on tiptoes, I approached the office window. I needed to get out of there and alert the police. Not only was my life in danger, but also Ray's and, most importantly, Evan's. I opened the window with extreme care, avoiding making any sound. The ledge was narrower than I had imagined, only about 12 inches wide. Below, the nearly 20-foot drop ended in the back lawn. In other times, I wouldn't even consider this option, but desperation is a powerful motivator. I put one foot outside, feeling the cold, early morning air. I needed to gather all my courage to pass the other leg through the window and balance precariously on the ledge. My joints protested. Arthritis is no joke at 70 years old, but fear gave me an agility I didn't know I still possessed. Suddenly, I heard agitated voices on the first floor, a dull thud followed by a groan. My heart clenched, recognizing Ray's voice. They had caught him. Who else is with you, old man? Mark's harsh voice echoed through the house. How did you know to come here? I couldn't hear Ray's response, but the sound of something heavy falling made me shudder. I closed my eyes for a second, begging forgiveness from my old friend. I couldn't help him now. The best chance we had was for me to escape and get help. I began moving laterally along the ledge, inch by inch, my back pressed against the wall, my fingers gripping the rough texture. Sweat ran down my face despite the night's cold. There was a trellis covered with ivy at the corner of the house. If I could reach it, maybe I could use it to descend to the garden. It was risky, but less than jumping directly. Rachel, I found someone, Mark's voice shouted from inside the house. An old man trying to get in through the back. What? Who is he? My daughter's voice sounded distant, coming from my room. He won't talk, but he seems to know your mother. She must be nearby. I froze on the ledge. They knew I was in the house. The search would intensify. I no longer had time for caution. I needed to act. With a burst of adrenaline, I reached the trellis and began to descend, ignoring the pain in my joints and the scratches from the wooden stakes. I half-slipped, half-descended the last few yards, falling awkwardly on the grass with a dull thud that made my left hip throb with pain. There was no time to complain. I got up as best I could and ran as silently as possible through the back garden toward the low wall that divided our property from the neighbor's house. While I slipped through the shadow of the trees, I heard the office window being opened violently. A flashlight beam swept the garden, almost catching me. I crouched behind a bush, holding my breath. Is there anyone down there? Mark's voice resonated through the night. I'm going to check. Keep the old man tied up. I climbed the wall with difficulty, falling on the other side into the Lopez's garden. Our elderly neighbors, who fortunately were heavy sleepers and were traveling, I ran across their lawn, skirting the house, feeling a sharp stab in my hip with each step. When I reached the parallel street, I was already gasping, but fear propelled me forward. I got as far away from the house as possible, running through the shadows until I reached a main avenue where some bars were still open with people on the sidewalk. I'm so glad you're still here. Would you do me a small favor? Tap the like button and leave a red heart below. Knowing you're still here truly makes me happy. I took out my cell phone and dialed the emergency number with trembling hands. While waiting for them to answer, I checked the photos I had taken of the documents in the office. They were there, the evidence we needed. Police, what's your emergency? The operator's calm voice sounded on the phone. My name is Margaret Walker, I said, trying to control the tremor in my voice. I need to report an attempted murder. My daughter is planning to kill me and my grandson for insurance money. She has an accomplice, and they just captured a friend of mine who tried to help me. There was a pause on the other end. I could imagine what the operator was thinking. Another paranoid old woman imagining conspiracies. "Ma'am, where are you now?" he asked, his tone professional but cautious. "On Congress Avenue, near number 1500. I'm fleeing from my house. Please, I need you to send patrol cars to Bluebonnet Street, 237. My friend Ray is in mortal danger." "Do you have any proof of these accusations?" "I have photographed documents and a witness, my 7-year-old grandson, who heard my daughter planning it all." I hesitated, then added, "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Please, there's no time to lose." While I was talking, a patrol car slowly passed down the avenue. I waved frantically, still with the phone to my ear. To my relief, the patrol car stopped. 2 police officers got out, approaching with cautious expressions. "There are police officers here," I told the operator. "I'm going to explain the situation to them." The next few minutes were a whirlwind. I quickly explained the situation to the officers, showing the photos of the documents on my cell phone. I mentioned Evan, safe in Ray's apartment, and Ray's own situation, possibly injured and held hostage in my house. Something in my urgency, or in the evidence I presented, must have convinced the officers. One of them spoke on the radio requesting backup, while the other helped me into the patrol car. "We're going to rescue your friend first," said the older officer, a man whose face was marked by years of service. "Then we'll look for your grandson. Can you give us the exact address where he is?" I provided the address of the old building and instructions to reach the employee apartment. My concern now was that Rachel and her accomplice, realizing I had escaped, might deduce where Evan would be. Would she remember Ray and our old friendship? The patrol car accelerated through the almost deserted streets at that early morning hour. 2 other patrol cars followed us, sirens silent, only the lights flashing in the night. My heart was racing as we approached my house. "There's an entrance through the back," I explained to the officer. "The kitchen door. Ray must be on the first floor." We stopped at a safe distance. The officers asked me to wait in the patrol car while they surrounded the house. I watched anxiously as they positioned themselves, communicating through radios. It seemed like an eternity, though it was probably only a few minutes. Then everything happened very quickly. I heard shouts of "Police! Hands up!" followed by the sound of breaking glass. A door slammed violently. More shouts, a crash, and then silence. Minutes later, I saw Ray being helped out of the house by 2 officers. My old friend was limping with a visible cut on his forehead, but he was alive. I felt such great relief that tears ran down my face. Immediately, Mark came out in handcuffs, escorted by 2 officers. He was a burly man with tattoos on his arms and a furious expression on his face. I waited with my heart clenched for Rachel, but she didn't appear. The older officer approached the patrol car where I was waiting. "The house is clear, ma'am, but your daughter isn't here. It looks like she fled through the back when she realized we were arriving." A chill ran down my spine. "Evan," I whispered, "we need to get to my grandson before she does." The patrol car cut through the night at full speed, siren on. This time I was sitting in the back seat, hands twisting with anxiety. Beside me, Ray, with an improvised bandage on his forehead, looked equally worried. "She didn't know where we were," he said, trying to calm me. "I didn't mention the apartment when they caught me." But I couldn't calm down. There was a dark presentiment growing in my chest. Rachel was intelligent. She knew my old friends, my old habits. If she remembered Ray, she could deduce where to look. When we arrived at the old building, my heart almost stopped. The service door that led to the employee apartment was ajar. "Stay here," the officer ordered, drawing his weapon. But I couldn't obey. I jumped out of the patrol car and ran behind him, ignoring the protests. Ray followed me, limping. The hallway was dark and silent. The apartment door was closed, apparently intact. The officer knocked 3 times. "Evan," I called, my voice trembling. "Evan, sweetheart, it's Grandma. Are you there?" Silence. A silence that pierced my ears like needles. The officer tried the handle, locked. He stepped back a little, then advanced with his shoulder, knocking down the door with a crash. The apartment was dark. The officer entered first, turning on his flashlight, followed by me and Ray. He swept the small space with the light beam, the empty kitchen, the living room with the sofa bed disheveled. "Evan," I called again, panic growing in my throat. That's when I noticed something on the sofa bed, a piece of torn paper trapped under an empty glass. I picked it up with trembling hands and read the message written in hurried handwriting. Mom found me. She said she needs to protect me from you, that you're crazy and making up stories. "I'm scared, Grandma. Help!" My knees gave out. Ray held me before I could fall to the floor. "She took him," I murmured, stunned. "Rachel took Evan." The officer immediately activated his radio, communicating the kidnapping of a child. Within minutes, an operation was being mounted. Description of Rachel, her car, Evan, roadblocks at city exits, alerts on highways, and at the airport. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Rachel was meticulous. She had been planning this for months. She certainly had prepared escape routes, maybe false documents, and she knew Evan better than anyone. She knew exactly what to say to make him cooperate, even temporarily. I was taken to the police station along with Ray, where we gave detailed statements. I showed the photos of the documents, recounted everything Evan had heard, explained about the life insurance and Rachel's growing greed. Detective Miller, a middle-aged man with deep bags under his eyes, listened to everything attentively. Contrary to what I feared, he didn't treat me like a confused old woman. The evidence was too strong, especially after Mark's statement. The accomplice began to corroborate my story. "He's cooperating to reduce his own sentence," Detective Miller explained. "He confirmed that your daughter hired him to simulate a gas leak that would kill you and your grandson during sleep. He would be paid with part of the insurance money." I felt nauseous hearing the confirmation of that macabre plan. "And what about Evan?" I asked, my voice broken. "Do you have any leads yet?" The detective hesitated. "Not yet, but we're monitoring all exit routes from the city. Your daughter won't get far." But I wasn't so sure. Hours passed, and each minute without news increased my anguish. Sitting in the police station waiting room with an untouched cup of tea, I felt myself aging even more rapidly. Ray was beside me, silent, occasionally squeezing my hand in solidarity. His face showed concern, but also determination. "We're going to find him, Mrs. Walker," he said after a long silence. "Evan is a smart boy. He'll find a way to leave us clues." I nodded, trying to hold on to that hope. Evan really was extraordinary. His perception and intelligence had already saved us once. Maybe they could save him now. That's when I remembered something I had overlooked, something Evan had mentioned days ago, something about Rachel and a special place. "Wait," I said, straightening up in my chair. "I think I know where she might have taken Evan." Ray and the officer passing through the room looked at me expectantly. 2 weeks ago, Evan mentioned that Rachel took him to see a surprise house, a place in the countryside a few hours from the city. He got excited because there were animals and a lake. At the time, I thought it was just an outing. Detective Miller was called immediately. I explained my suspicion. Rachel could be preparing this place as a refuge, where she would flee after the accident that would kill us. "Do you know where that property is located?" asked the detective. "Not exactly." Evan mentioned it was near a small town. I think the name was something like Hill Country or Fredericksburg, something like that. It wasn't much, but it was a clue. The investigators began checking records of properties recently acquired or rented in small towns with those names, within a radius of a few hours from the capital. Meanwhile, I received alarming news. Rachel's car had been found abandoned at a gas station on the highway heading west. She had probably changed vehicles. The search was getting complicated. The clock on the police station wall showed 5:30 a.m. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten slightly. I hadn't slept in almost 24 hours, but adrenaline and fear kept me alert. That's when my phone, which had been returned after forensics examined the photos, vibrated in my pocket. An unknown number, I answered with my heart pounding. "Hello, Grandma." Evan's voice, small and scared, made my heart jump. Evan, sweetheart, where are you? Are you okay? I'm okay, he whispered. Mom is sleeping now. I found her cell phone and hid it to call. You're so brave, my love, I said, trying to keep my voice calm while making frantic signals to the detective, who quickly called a technician to trace the call. Can you tell me where you are? It's a house in the countryside. It has a lake and lots of trees. We came by car, but it was a long trip, and I slept a little. When I woke up, we were already here. Do you see any signs? Any names nearby? I can't look out the window now. Mom might wake up. His voice trembled. She's different, Grandma. She says strange things. She says you want to hurt us. Don't believe her, sweetheart. I'm doing everything to find you. There was silence, then a sound of movement. When Evan spoke again, his voice was even lower. There's a mailbox at the entrance. It says, Fredericksburg Hill Country Ranch, Highway 290, mile marker 142. My heart raced. It was the clue we needed. Evan, you're incredible, I whispered. Now listen carefully. Find a safe place to hide. The police are coming there, but it might take a while. You need to stay away from your mother. Do you understand? I understand. There's an old barn behind the house. I'm going to hide there. That's right, sweetheart. I hesitated, feeling my throat tighten. And Evan, I love you so much. Everything's going to be okay. I love you too, Grandma, he whispered. Then, in an even lower tone, she's moving. I need to hang up. The call dropped. I jumped up, relaying the information to the detective. Within minutes, an operation was being organized. Highway 290, heading west, had several ranches and farms near mile marker 142, but a place called Fredericksburg Hill Country Ranch would be easy to locate. You should stay here, said the detective as the officers prepared. We'll go get your grandson and arrest your daughter. But I couldn't just wait. Evan was alone, facing the terror of discovering that his own mother was capable of harming him and his grandmother. He needed to see a familiar face when he was rescued. I'm going with you, I said in a tone that admitted no discussion. I can wait in the patrol car, away from danger, but I need to be there for Evan. After some resistance, the detective agreed with the condition that I remain at a safe distance until the situation was under control. Ray insisted on accompanying me, despite his injuries. I promised the boy I would protect him, he said simply. So, in the first light of morning, we departed westward in a caravan of patrol cars. The sun was rising on the horizon, tinting the sky with pink and golden tones that cruelly contrasted with the darkness in my heart. During the journey, I couldn't stop thinking about what had led Rachel to this point. My sweet girl, whom I had cradled in my arms, whom I had watched take her first steps, say her first words. How had she transformed into someone capable of coldly planning the death of her own mother and her own son? Money was certainly part of the answer, but there was something more. A coldness, a disconnection that I had seen growing over the years. Maybe it had begun after my son-in-law's death, or maybe the signs were there much earlier and I, blinded by a mother's love, didn't want to see them. These bitter reflections accompanied me throughout the entire journey as I watched the urban landscape gradually give way to fields and small rural properties. When we finally arrived at mile marker 142, my heart was in my throat. A discreet sign indicated the entrance to Fredericksburg Hill Country Ranch, a dirt road that wound between trees until disappearing around a curve. The officers stopped the patrol cars before the entrance to avoid alerting Rachel. From there, they would continue on foot, surrounding the property. Wait here, Mrs. Walker, said Detective Miller in a firm but kind tone. I promise we'll bring your grandson back safely. I nodded resignedly. Ray held my hand as we watched the officers move away in tactical formation, disappearing among the trees. The minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Sitting in the patrol car, I peered through the window, trying to see something beyond the trees. The police radio crackled occasionally with coded communications that I couldn't understand. Then we heard a distant shout, agitated voices, and the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. That single shot echoed in the quiet morning like thunder, making my heart stop for a second. Without thinking, I opened the patrol car door and began running down the dirt road, ignoring Ray's shouts behind me. Mrs. Walker, come back. But I couldn't wait. Evan was in there, my grandson, my light, the only person who really mattered. Now I ran like I hadn't run in decades, ignoring the pain in my injured hip and my gasping breath. Age seemed to have disappeared, propelled by the adrenaline of fear. Ray came limping behind me, trying to catch up. Turning the curve in the road, I spotted the house, a simple 2-story construction with a wooden porch. About 100 yards back was an old barn, exactly as Evan had described. Officers were positioned around the property, weapons drawn. There was movement on the porch. I squinted, trying to see better, and felt my blood freeze when I recognized Rachel. She was pale, disheveled, almost unrecognizable in the fury that distorted her face. In one hand she held something that gleamed under the morning sun, a gun. And with her other arm she held Evan in front of her like a human shield. "Nobody come closer," she was shouting, her shrill voice cutting through the air. "Or I swear I'll shoot." Detective Miller was positioned a few yards from the porch, partially protected by a tree. "Mrs. Rachel, put down the weapon and let the boy go," he spoke in a firm but calm tone. "There's no way out of here. The house is surrounded. You don't understand." Rachel screamed, her voice breaking. "She stole everything from me. My father left that money for me, not for her. She never let me touch anything. Always controlling, always dictating how I should live." I remained paralyzed a few yards away, hidden by the police patrol car parked ahead. Her words hit me like stabs. That's how she saw me, as a controller who deprived her of what was rightfully hers. Evan was pale, his eyes wide with terror, but strangely calm. His eyes scanned the terrain around him, as if looking for an escape route. Even in this extreme situation, my grandson maintained the presence of mind that characterized him. "Your father left the money for all of us," the detective replied, trying to buy time. "I'm sure we can resolve this without anyone getting hurt." "Lies." Rachel tightened her arm around Evan. She manipulated the will. She always manipulated everything, and now she's making me look crazy, inventing stories about me wanting to kill her. Ray finally reached me, gasping. He grabbed my arm, preventing me from moving forward. "Don't expose yourself," he whispered. "The police know what they're doing, but I couldn't just stand there." With each passing second, the situation seemed more volatile. Rachel was visibly unstable, her eyes wild and savage, the hand holding the gun trembling slightly. That's when I noticed Evan looking directly toward the barn behind the house. His eyes went back and forth as if trying to communicate something to me. I followed his gaze and noticed an officer silently positioning himself behind the barn, moving to flank the house. I understood what Evan was doing. He was consciously distracting his mother, keeping her focused on the front of the house while the officers positioned themselves behind. Even in this terrible situation, my 7-year-old grandson was cooperating with the police, showing courage and intelligence that left me speechless. "Rachel," I called, stepping forward, ignoring Ray's desperate pull on my arm. She turned abruptly. The gun pointed in my direction. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "You," she hissed. "How did you manage to escape? You should be dead in the fire." "There was no fire, Rachel," I replied calmly, taking another step. The officers tensed but didn't interfere, realizing I was buying time. "Your plan failed because Evan heard everything. He saved our lives." Rachel's face contorted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. She looked at Evan, who held her gaze without blinking. "You," she whispered to her son, "betrayed me." "He didn't betray anyone," I said, continuing to advance slowly. "He only protected those he loves, just as I always tried to protect you." "Protect?" She laughed, a shrill, almost hysterical sound. "You suffocated me, always controlling my life, my money, my dreams. When Dad died, that money should have been mine." "Money was never the problem, Rachel," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite my racing heart. "Your father wanted you to live by your own merits, not dependent on an inheritance. He loved you. I love you. Lies," she screamed, the gun hand trembling visibly. "If you loved me, you would have given me what was mine by right." At that moment I realized that nothing I said would convince her. Greed and resentment had corroded her mind for years, maybe decades, transforming her into someone I barely recognized. "Let Evan go," I pleaded, now only a few yards from the porch. "He has nothing to do with this. It's between you and me." I saw a flash of something, hesitation, maybe even guilt, pass across Rachel's face. For a brief moment, it seemed like she was considering my request. It was in that instant that Evan acted. With a quick movement that took everyone by surprise, he bit the arm that was holding him and threw himself to the side, rolling across the porch. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. Rachel screamed in pain. The gun fired with the shot going into the air, and the officers advanced from all directions. I ran the last few yards to the porch, ignoring the officers' shouts for me to get back. All I could see was Evan, huddled next to the railing, trembling. I reached him at the same instant the officers overpowered Rachel, forcing her to the ground and handcuffing her. She was screaming and struggling, unrecognizable in her fury. I hugged Evan with all the strength I had left, feeling his small body tremble against mine. He was alive. He was safe. "Grandma," he whispered, clinging to me. "You came." "I'll always come, my love," I replied, tears finally flowing freely. Always. Over Evan's shoulders, my eyes met Rachel's as she was being led away by the officers. For a moment, mother and daughter looked at each other across the unbridgeable abyss that now separated us. There was no longer rage in her eyes, only a desolate emptiness. The woman I had known, my daughter, seemed to have disappeared completely, leaving only a shell of what she once was. And then she was taken away to the patrol car, and I focused entirely on Evan, on the miracle of having him safe in my arms. The sun now shone high in the sky, illuminating my grandson's tear-stained face. I ran my hand through his hair, marveled by his courage. "How did you know she was planning that?" I asked gently when we were sitting in the ambulance that had arrived to examine us. "How did you manage to realize her plan?" Evan bit his lower lip, thoughtful. "I always wake up early, Grandma. Mom thinks I sleep late, but I actually stay quiet in bed thinking." I smiled, caressing his face. So observant, so attentive to everything. "That morning I heard her on the phone," he continued. "She was talking differently, like she was angry but trying not to show it." I went to the hallway and stayed listening by the office door. The paramedic finished checking Evan's vital signs and gave us some privacy. Moving away to talk with the officers. She talked about the gas and about us sleeping. Evan lowered his voice. "She said she wanted Grandpa's money, that she was tired of waiting, that there was going to be an accident." He looked at me, his eyes suddenly older than his age. "I knew nobody would believe me if I told them. Adults never believe kids when it's something important." That last phrase broke my heart. How many times had he tried to alert me before with small observations that I had dismissed as childish imagination? "But you believed me at the airport," I said softly. A small smile lit up his face. "Yes, you believed when it mattered." I hugged him again, feeling immense gratitude for this small being who with his extraordinary perception had saved us. Detective Miller approached us, his face showing a mixture of relief and concern. "Evan and you need to go to the hospital for a complete checkup," he said. "Then we'll need detailed statements, but that can wait a bit." I nodded, grateful for the sensitivity. "Rachel," I hesitated, still unable to fully process what my own daughter had become. "What's going to happen to her?" "She'll face serious charges," the detective replied, keeping his voice low so Evan wouldn't hear all the details. "Attempted murder, kidnapping of a minor, illegal weapon possession, among others. With the accomplice's testimony and the evidence you collected, the case is quite solid." A deep sadness enveloped me. Not for the Rachel of now, that person who pointed a gun at me and used her own son as a shield, but for the girl she had been. For the daughter I had raised with so much love. "Can I see her before you take her away?" I asked, surprising even myself. The detective hesitated, evaluating my state. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I need that closure," he nodded slowly. "I'll check, but it will be brief and under supervision." I turned to Evan, who was watching our conversation attentively. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to your mom for a minute." Will you stay here okay with Ray? Evan hesitated, a flash of fear crossing his face. She won't hurt you again? No, I assured him. There are police officers everywhere. We're safe now. Ray, who had remained discreetly by our side the whole time, stepped forward. We'll be fine here, champ. Your grandma will be back soon. Evan nodded reluctantly, letting me walk away. Detective Miller led me to one of the patrol cars parked in the shade of a tree. Rachel was sitting in the back seat, hands handcuffed, her gaze lost in emptiness. When I approached, her eyes slowly focused on me. There was no longer fury in them, only immense fatigue and something that seemed, for an instant, like shame. Can I talk to her? I asked the officer who was watching her. He nodded, opening the car door, but remaining attentive by my side. Rachel, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Why? She held my gaze for a few seconds before looking away to the ground. You would never understand, she murmured. Try to explain it to me, I insisted. I owe it to Evan. I need to understand how you could plan to kill your own son. A spasm of pain crossed her face. I wasn't going to... She hesitated, as if realizing the absurdity of what she was about to say. At first it was just about you. The insurance money, the house. I was drowning in debt, Mother, more than you can imagine. And Evan, she swallowed hard. Mark said we needed to include him, that 2 deaths from a gas leak would be more believable than 1, that if only you died, the police would immediately suspect me. Her voice failed. I tried to argue that we could simply send him away to boarding school, something like that. But Mark insisted it was all or nothing. And you agreed, I said, not as a question, but as a painful statement. Rachel didn't respond. Her silence was more condemning than any confession. Do you realize what you did? What you almost did? My voice now trembled with contained emotion. Evan is going to grow up knowing that his own mother planned his death for money. What kind of scar will that leave on him? Tears began to flow down Rachel's face. Tears that I couldn't tell if they were from genuine remorse or just self-pity. I wasn't thinking clearly, she whispered. The debts, the pressure, it seemed like the only way out. There's always another way out, I replied. You could have told me about the debts. We could have sold the house, used part of the insurance money legally. I would have helped you. You would have controlled me like you always did, she retorted, a flash of the old bitterness returning. You would have dictated how and when I could use the money. I sighed, realizing it was useless. The distorted version Rachel had of me, of our relationship, was deeply rooted in her mind. Maybe it was always there, growing silently while I believed we were close. You're going to need help, Rachel, I said finally. Not just from lawyers, but from doctors. There's something broken inside you that money could never fix. She looked at me, her face a mask of defeat. And Evan? Evan will stay with me, I replied firmly. I'll do everything in my power to help him overcome this, to help him understand that what you did doesn't define who he is. Rachel nodded slowly, as if that was expected. You'll be a good mother to him, she said quietly. Better than I ever would be. It was the closest thing to a conscience I would see in her that day. The officer indicated that our time was up. I stood up, feeling strangely lighter, as if a weight had been removed from my shoulders. Goodbye, Rachel, I said, looking one last time at the woman my daughter had become. I hope you find peace someday. I turned my back and walked toward Evan and Ray, who were waiting for me by the ambulance. I didn't look back when the patrol car left, taking Rachel to a future of trials, sentences, and, I hoped, treatment. Evan ran toward me as soon as he saw me, hugging my legs. Are you okay, Grandma? I crouched down, getting to his eye level. I am, sweetheart. And you? He nodded gravely. I'm sad but relieved. It's weird to feel both things at the same time. No, my love, I smiled, moved by the emotional maturity of this extraordinary creature. It's perfectly normal. In the days and weeks that followed, we faced the bureaucratic and emotional whirlwind that followed the event. Police statements, preliminary hearings, consultations with child psychologists for Evan. The media tried to turn our tragedy into a sensationalist circus. But we managed to maintain some privacy thanks to Detective Miller, who protected us as much as possible. Rachel was formally charged and awaited trial in preventive detention. Her accomplice, Mark, made a plea bargain providing details that only solidified the case against her. Preliminary psychiatric evaluations suggested a severe personality disorder, exacerbated by financial problems and long-standing resentments. Evan and I temporarily moved to Ray's apartment until we managed to find a new house, a new beginning away from the dark memories of the old residence. Evan's therapist said he was adapting surprisingly well, considering the trauma. His resilience was remarkable, although there were nights when he woke up screaming, haunted by nightmares. On one of those nights, while I was calming him after a particularly bad dream, Evan asked me the question I knew would eventually come. "Grandma," he said, his voice small in the darkness of the room. "Why did Mom want to hurt us? Didn't she love us?" I sat on the edge of his bed, searching for the right words. How do you explain something so complex and painful to a 7-year-old boy? "Evan," I began slowly, "your mom is sick, not like when someone has the flu or a stomachache. It's an illness that affects how she thinks and feels. It makes her see the world in a distorted way." He absorbed this in silence, his eyes reflecting the dim light from the night lamp. "She loved us in her way," I continued. "But that illness made her make terrible decisions that healthy people wouldn't make." "Will she get better someday?" he asked, his voice hopeful, breaking my heart. "I don't know, sweetheart," I replied honestly. "Some people with that illness get better with treatment. Others don't. What I know is that you're safe now and that I love you more than anything in this world." Evan nodded, seeming to accept that explanation for now. "I love you too, Grandma," he said, hugging me. "Thank you for believing me." "I'll always believe you," I promised, kissing his forehead. Always. We stayed like that for a long time, embraced in the twilight, grandmother and grandson, united by a bond that betrayal and danger had strengthened instead of breaking. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, the ones on your screen are just for you. If this story brought a word, a thought, or a feeling to your mind, share it in the comments. Let's see whose words will touch the most hearts. Thank you for listening.